And I'm joined here in the studio by Alison Sargent for a look at what's grabbing headlines in written press. Hi, Alison.
Hi, Molly.
We are going to start off with a reaction from South Africa. This to where papers are responding to a tweet from U.S. President Donald Trump in which he decried the killing of white farmers and the seizure of their land.
Right. This is a tweet that he sent out after watching a report on the subject on Fox News. You can see what most people in South Africa are thinking about these comments by taking a look at some of the front pages of their newspapers today. From the Star, we have ANC, which is the country's ruling party, blasts ignorant Trump. Meanwhile, South Africa's largest Afrikaans language paper, Beeld, cites the South African President Cyril Ramaphosa on their front page. His words in response to this: Trump only seeks to divide us. Because as all of the papers point out, land reform in South Africa is a very complex and sensitive issue. It's been over 20 years since the apartheid, and white South Africans still own over 70% of the farmland, despite making up only about 8% of the country's population. The South African government does want to speed up the process of redistributing land, but papers point out that so far no land has been taken without compensation, as Donald Trump claims. The government is considering it, but it's not something that they're just going to do recklessly.
And we've got some who are saying that Donald Trump was the reckless one by really galvanizing the right.
Right. While the majority of South Africans were pretty enraged over Donald Trump's comments, they did please a minority group of South Africans, in particular a group called Afro Forum. They're an advocacy group for white South Africans, and the New York Times explains how this spring they actually took a trip to the United States to meet with right-wing groups and politicians over there. That's how their cause wound up on Fox News under the eyes of Donald Trump. The New York Times writes that the narrative of a possible white genocide happening in various African countries has become a very popular idea among white nationalists, white supremacists in the United States, many of whom are supporters of the U.S. president and many of whom were also celebrating this tweet.
All right, well, we're going to cross now to Ireland. This is where the country is gearing up for the arrival of the Pope.
That's right. Pope Francis arrives on Saturday in Dublin. It's been about 40 years since the country last saw a visit from the Pope. That was John Paul II. And Ireland has really changed quite a lot since then. This columnist for the Irish Times writes that popes didn't even used to visit Ireland because they didn't have to. It would have been like preaching to the converted. But now mass attendance has dropped from about 80% to about 35%. The country legalized same-sex marriage. This past spring, they voted to legalize abortion. All social changes that this writer says might have happened sort of slowly and gently, but instead happened very quickly and somewhat bitterly because of the widespread institutional and sexual abuse scandals and also their cover-up. And he says now there's no going back. Meanwhile, others are saying that the Pope's apology this week was really too little, too late. You can see in this cartoon from the Irish edition of the Times, some Pope merchandise is for sale there with messages like, "Forgive us, we'll do better." And we can see that woman's response. She says, "I'm not buying it." And finally, The Guardian reports that a number of people are hoping to send a message to the Pope by reserving tickets to his Mass on Sunday and then not showing up. They're calling themselves the Nope to the Pope campaign. Irish leader Leo Varadkar has actually criticized this initiative. He says it's sort of mean-spirited because it could deny other people the chance to go if you're taking up the tickets and then not showing up. Protesters, though, say that they're just trying to send a respectful message, and they plan to hold protest vigils at the same time as this Mass on Sunday.
All right, well, now moving here to France, and we're going to talk a bit about yesterday's stabbing that took place in the Parisian suburb of Trappes.
Right, a man killed his mother and sister and wounded another woman, an event that the Parisian authorities are not treating like a terrorist incident, and you can tell French papers don't really know what to make of it. You can take a look at this headline from Le Figaro. They're asking, terrorism or psychotic break? Libération, meanwhile, has a great headline today. The Islamic State claim a fait divers, and a fait divers is basically a tabloid story in France, sort of a local crime story, which really, I think this headline kind of gets at the absurdity of the Islamic State claiming an attack like this one. It sort of makes them look a little bit desperate. And that's essentially what an analyst told Libération, that as we've seen the Islamic State group get weaker on the ground, they've been more quick to claim any attack that sort of resembles one that they might carry out themselves.
All right, well, now finally, we do head into the weekend now after this Friday, and you've got a bit of sobering news for us.
That's right, Molly. We all like to think that a glass of wine a day keeps the doctor away, but it turns out that it's actually the opposite. This is a sort of a disappointing headline. You can read it here in the Washington Post. The safest level of alcohol consumption is none at all. That's according to a study that claims to be the largest alcohol study done to date. They find that while there are some benefits to alcohol, like lowering the risk of heart disease, well, they are far outweighed by the health risks, which include several types of cancer. The good news, Molly, is that it all depends on the individual and your other risk factors. So ultimately, having one drink a day is not going to kill you, but we shouldn't keep fooling ourselves by telling ourselves that it's good for us.
Oh, well, all right. Cheers to that good news.
Cheers.
Okay. Allison, thank you very much for that. And for more, you can always head to our website. That's france24.com/inthepress.